You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your Security Plus certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. The purpose of security policies is to set expectations, assign responsibilities, and provide enforceable rules that guide behavior across the organization. Policies establish a common framework for how security is handled, ensuring that every employee, contractor, and partner understands the boundaries within which they operate. Without clear policies, organizations rely on informal practices, which can vary wildly and expose critical risks. A well-written policy reduces ambiguity and ensures consistency. For instance, an acceptable use policy defines what is and isn't permitted when using company devices, networks, or cloud systems. A data classification policy ensures everyone knows how to handle sensitive versus public data. For learners, think of policies like the rulebook in sports. They don't dictate how every play unfolds, but they define the boundaries, penalties, and expectations so the game can be played fairly, consistently, and safely. Policies are not all created equal. They are structured in tiers. At the highest level, board or executive-approved policies establish overarching commitments, such as the organization will protect customer data consistent with regulatory requirements and best practices. Beneath these, program-level policies cover specific areas like access control, incident response, or encryption. Finally, operational or procedural policies provide detailed guidance on how policies are executed, often supported by standards or playbooks. This tiering ensures that executives set direction, programs define focus, and operations implement the details. For learners, think of tiering like a legal system. The Constitution defines broad principles, laws add specificity, and regulations outline how those laws are enforced day to day. In security, tiered policies ensure alignment between leadership intent and operational practice. There are several must-have policies that form the backbone of any mature security program. Acceptable use policies govern how employees interact with company technology. Access control policies dictate how identities are managed and how least privilege is enforced. Incident response policies define escalation paths and roles during breaches. Data classification policies categorize information into levels such as public, internal, confidential, or restricted, guiding how each type is handled. BYOD policies address the risks of personal devices on corporate networks. Each of these areas addresses a foundational risk surface. For learners, imagine building a house. You need rules for who can enter, what valuables must be locked away, how to handle fires, and whether guests can use personal tools inside. Similarly, these core policies ensure that basic risks are addressed before more specialized policies are added. A critical distinction exists between policies and standards. Policies set expectations, while standards define specific, testable requirements that demonstrate compliance with the policy. For example, a policy may require encryption of sensitive data, but the standard specifies AES 256 encryption must be used for data at rest. Standards provide the precision needed to test whether controls meet the intent of the policy. Without standards, policies remain vague and unenforceable. For learners, think of policies as setting the rule, like students must wear uniforms, while standards define the details such as uniforms must be navy blue with black shoes and a school crest on the left chest. The two work together. Policies establish the obligation, and standards provide the criteria for verification. Policy authorship requires best practices to ensure adoption. Policies should be written in business-aligned language rather than dense technical jargon, making them understandable to all audiences. They should be minimally prescriptive, focusing on outcomes rather than detailed instructions which belong in standards or procedures. Stakeholder review is critical. Policies must be vetted by legal, HR, IT, and business leaders to ensure feasibility and alignment. Poorly written policies confuse, alienate, or create unnecessary friction. For learners, think of policies like company handbooks. They must be clear, relevant, and practical, not just aspirational. A policy drafted solely by technical staff without business alignment risks becoming ignored or circumvented. Governance demands policies that inspire compliance because they are realistic, clear, and endorsed by leadership. Exception management is an unavoidable part of policy life. Some business processes or legacy systems cannot meet current policy requirements. Governance frameworks must define how exceptions are requested, approved, and monitored. Exceptions should be documented, approved by appropriate authorities, protected with compensating controls, and given expiration dates so they are revisited periodically. Without exception management, policies either fail because they are unenforceable or create hidden shadow exceptions where employees ignore them. For learners, this is like medical exemptions to standard health rules. They exist, but they require formal approval, alternative safeguards, and periodic reassessment. Policy exceptions should not undermine governance, but instead demonstrate its flexibility and accountability. Policies must also be distributed and attested to. Publishing policies in a repository or intranet site is only the first step. Employees must be notified, often during onboarding and through refresher cycles, and required to attest that they have read and understood them. This attestation creates accountability and provides evidence during audits that the organization not only had policies, but also ensured they were communicated. For learners, think of this like school syllabi. Teachers don't just write the rules, they make students sign acknowledgement forms. Similarly, security policies must be visible, accessible, and acknowledged by those expected to follow them. Another critical element is linking policies to controls and evidence. For example, an access control policy must be supported by technical enforcement in identity management systems and validated through evidence like logs, screenshots, or audit reports. Without this linkage, auditors may challenge whether policies are real or just paper exercises. Governance requires policies to be embedded in the control environment and backed by demonstrable evidence. For learners, think of this like safety rules in a factory. It's not enough to post signs. You need machine guards, inspection logs, and supervisor reports that prove the rule is enforced. Linking policy to evidence transforms documents into credible governance artifacts. Policies must also have versioning and archival processes. Each revision should be documented with dates, version numbers, and rationale for changes. Archived versions should be preserved to show auditors and regulators how policies evolved over time. This ensures transparency, avoids confusion about which policy applies, and demonstrates continuous improvement. For learners, think of this like software updates. Each version is tracked with release notes, bug fixes, and improvements. Policies require the same discipline, ensuring there is a clear record of what changed, when, and why, so no one is left guessing or relying on outdated guidance. Enforcement mechanisms are what make policies more than suggestions. Technical controls, such as password managers or endpoint configuration tools, enforce compliance automatically. Monitoring systems can detect violations, while disciplinary processes hold individuals accountable when violations are willful or negligent. Enforcement must balance fairness with deterrence. Technical enforcement should be the first line, backed by training and cultural reinforcement, with disciplinary action as the last resort. For learners, think of this like traffic rules. Most people comply because of clear signals and automatic enforcement like speed cameras, but fines and penalties exist for those who repeatedly break the rules. Enforcement ensures that policies are respected in practice, not just in principle. The life cycle of a policy is cyclical, not static. It begins with creation, followed by communication and attestation. Enforcement and monitoring ensure compliance, and periodic reviews confirm whether the policy remains relevant. Eventually, outdated policies must be retired or replaced. This life cycle ensures policies adapt to changing technologies, threats, and regulations. For learners, think of this like product life cycles. Products are launched, marketed, used, updated, and eventually retired. Policies must follow a similar cycle of relevance and renewal. A living policy environment demonstrates governance maturity and responsiveness to change. A practical exercise to bring these ideas into focus is to pick one critical area, such as data classification, and draft a concise policy statement. For example, all organizational data must be classified into public, internal, confidential, or restricted categories, with handling requirements defined accordingly. Then, create a one-page standard outlining minimum controls for each category. Route the draft to stakeholders for a 2-week review, incorporating their feedback. This small exercise demonstrates the full lifecycle: drafting, aligning, reviewing, and preparing for communication. For learners, this is like practicing a musical scale before playing a full symphony. By starting with one policy, you learn the mechanics of creation, review, and stakeholder engagement, building the skills to develop a broader policy suite. Harmonizing internal policies with external frameworks is a practical necessity for organizations that undergo audits or need to demonstrate regulatory compliance. Frameworks such as NIST Cybersecurity Framework, ISO 27001, and industry-specific mandates like PCI DSS or HIPAA define expectations for how organizations secure data. By aligning internal policies to these frameworks, organizations reduce redundancy, avoid conflicting requirements, and prepare themselves for external validation. For instance, an access control policy that requires multi-factor authentication can be mapped to both ISO control categories and NIST standards. This mapping gives auditors confidence that the organization's policies are not arbitrary but are grounded in globally recognized practices. For learners, this is like building a house according to both local building codes and international safety standards. Internal policies become stronger when harmonized, and audits become smoother because external reviewers can clearly see how obligations are met. Measuring policy effectiveness is another crucial part of governance. Policies are only useful if they change behavior and reduce risk, so organizations must define indicators that reveal whether policies are working. Examples include violation counts, such as the number of acceptable use violations reported in a quarter, attestation completion rates, showing how many employees acknowledged updated policies, and control test results, which demonstrate whether standards aligned with policies are being enforced. These metrics provide evidence that policies are alive and functioning, rather than documents sitting on a shelf. For learners, think of this like classroom rules. A school might track how often students break rules, how many sign the code of conduct, and whether test results show improved study habits. Policies in organizations must be evaluated the same way, with data-driven insight into whether they truly drive compliance and risk reduction. Embedding policies into processes ensures they are lived every day rather than referenced occasionally. Security policies should appear in onboarding workflows so new employees immediately learn expectations. Procurement should reference vendor security requirements aligned with internal standards. Change management should enforce configuration controls that stem from established policies. Incident response plans must map back to incident policies, ensuring escalation and reporting are consistent. Without embedding, policies remain theoretical and easily ignored. With embedding, they become part of daily operations. For learners, this is like safety rules in a factory. They aren't just printed on posters. They're integrated into machine operation procedures, training sessions, and supervisor checklists. Policies take hold only when they are integrated seamlessly into existing processes. Role-based tailoring is a key feature of modern security programs. Policies cannot be one-size-fits-all. They must be proportional to the risk posed by different roles. For example, system administrators may be subject to stricter access control and monitoring than regular employees. Developers working with code repositories may require tailored policies on secure coding and commit practices. Executives may have policies governing the use of mobile devices and secure communication due to their high-value targets. Tailoring ensures that employees receive guidance relevant to their responsibilities while minimizing unnecessary restrictions on low-risk roles. For learners, think of this like tailored training for athletes. A goalkeeper and a striker both follow team rules but require role-specific drills. Policies function the same way, applying universally at the top level but tailored in enforcement and expectations depending on risk and responsibility. Training and awareness are what transform policies from static documents into practiced behaviors. A written policy is meaningless if employees are unaware of its requirements or do not know how to apply it in their roles. Awareness programs translate policies into relatable scenarios, teaching employees not only what the rules are, but why they matter. For example, a data classification policy may be reinforced through exercises that walk staff through handling emails, cloud documents, or customer records according to classification tags. Measuring outcomes, such as reduced phishing click rates or improved reporting of policy violations, validates that awareness is working. For learners, think of this like driver's education. It's not enough to read the traffic laws. Students must practice and internalize them through hands-on learning. Security awareness programs provide the same bridge from policy to behavior. Automated enforcement represents the next evolution of policy compliance. Instead of relying solely on humans to follow policies, technology can enforce rules consistently. Policy as code is a growing practice where policies are written in machine-readable formats and enforced automatically in infrastructure pipelines. Guardrails in continuous integration and continuous deployment (CI/CD) systems can prevent insecure code from reaching production. Identity and access management templates can enforce least privilege by default. Automation reduces human error and ensures policies are consistently applied. For learners, imagine a building with automatic locks that enforce access rules rather than relying on guards to manually check every door. Automated enforcement ensures policies are not just aspirational but actively applied through technical controls. Exception dashboards are a governance tool that makes policy exceptions visible and manageable. Instead of exceptions being hidden in emails or informal approvals, dashboards consolidate them into a central view. Each exception can list the risk, expiration date, compensating controls, and approving authority. Dashboards provide leadership with clarity on how much risk has been temporarily accepted and when those exceptions need to be revisited. For learners, think of this like a pilot's cockpit warning lights. If systems are offline or bypassed, the dashboard highlights them so the crew is aware. Exception dashboards provide that same visibility for security governance, ensuring risks are not forgotten or allowed to linger indefinitely. Audit preparation becomes far easier when policies, standards, and evidence are organized and linked. Preparing for an external review should not involve frantic searches for documents and records. Instead, organizations should maintain packages of policy documents, control mappings, and attestation history that can be presented to auditors. This not only streamlines audits but demonstrates governance maturity. For learners, this is like preparing for an exam. Instead of cramming the night before, students who consistently review notes and keep organized study materials are ready whenever tested. Audit preparation works the same way. Governance ensures evidence is collected continuously, so audits become a confirmation exercise rather than a scramble. Policies, like technology, eventually become obsolete and must be retired or replaced. As tools, processes, and regulations evolve, outdated policies can create confusion or even harm by enforcing irrelevant or contradictory requirements. Governance requires a structured process for retiring policies, including stakeholder review and communication of replacements. Archival ensures historical versions are preserved for reference, but operational focus shifts to new policies aligned with current realities. For learners, think of this like updating software. Old versions may still exist for reference, but users are migrated to the updated release. Policy retirement ensures clarity and reduces friction, keeping the organization aligned with its present risk landscape. Continuous improvement ensures policies remain relevant and effective. Incidents provide lessons on gaps, audits reveal weaknesses, and regulatory changes create new requirements. Governance must feed these lessons back into the policy lifecycle. For instance, if an incident highlights weak monitoring, policies may be updated to require expanded logging and review. Improvement cycles prevent stagnation and demonstrate to stakeholders that policies are living instruments. For learners, think of this like athletic coaching. Game performance highlights strengths and weaknesses, which coaches feed back into training plans. Security programs must apply the same discipline, refining policies continuously to reflect real-world lessons. Executive sponsorship is critical for policy adoption and resourcing. Policies carry weight only if leaders endorse and enforce them. Sponsorship ensures policies are communicated broadly, enforced consistently, and resourced adequately with tools and training. Without executive support, policies risk being ignored or deprioritized. For learners, imagine school rules without principal support. Teachers may try to enforce them, but without top-level authority, compliance erodes. Security programs must secure executive sign-off for every major policy, ensuring they are not just documents written by IT, but recognized commitments of the entire organization. Ultimately, policies are living instruments that enable governance to be practical and enforceable. They must be drafted in clear, business-aligned language, tied to measurable standards, and enforced through both technical and cultural mechanisms. They must evolve continuously, supported by exception processes, automation, and executive sponsorship. Most importantly, they must be reviewed regularly with stakeholders, ensuring they reflect both regulatory requirements and business realities. For learners, the key takeaway is simple. Policies are not static artifacts. They are dynamic agreements between leadership, employees, and regulators that define how security is practiced daily. When treated as living tools, they provide the clarity, accountability, and resilience necessary for a mature security program. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.